Everyone, happy Friday. Let me know about the volume. I've been fiddling with the volume settings, so let me know if it's too loud or too quiet below. Sorry, Brad's just said there. So regarding to there's a few things. There's a few things come out today. The Epstein files aren't yet out, so we may have limited discussion here other than speculating what may come out. But there's other things going on as well. Labour are changing the way they do journalist lobbying, which sounds very good to me. There's more jiggery pokery on the trans front, but all been mentioned in the comments there. But so Brad's saying we'll know the juicy stuff has been released. This will be from the Epstein files. When Trump orders bombing raids over Venezuela, well, do not joke, because he has just, as we were sleeping last night, but in America yesterday, technically from their point of view, he's now not ruling out conflicts with Venezuela. I mean, he's already committing acts of piracy now. He's been sinking ships. He's now capturing oil. He's basically saying if an oil tanker comes, if we find an oil tanker, we're going to take it. That's what he's actually saying, isn't it? Am I missing something? He's actually saying Venezuela, an oil producing nation, if an oil tanker sets sail from Venezuela, apparently that's suspicious. Apparently it will be suspicious if an oil tanker sets off from one of the countries in the world with the largest oil reserves. And he's just going to take the tankers. We're just going to nick them. We're just going to steal them. Absolutely. Oh, sound's clipping. Have I got it on too loud? Try and turn it down a bit. It's because, I'll tell you what it is. I've said for some years, I had no problems with microphones. For years and years and years, you just plug them in, they work, it's fine, it's great. And I've streamed for whatever, best part of 10 years now. And all of a sudden, it was like suddenly everything is quiet. I turn everything to full, it's quiet, quiet, quiet. And I realised some time ago, in all honesty, it's only when I got Windows 11, so there's something with Windows, and there's a hidden setting in Windows 11, which I found this morning. So I bunged it all the way up. But it now means I've got to adjust other things, because everything else was on full before, so maybe it shouldn't be on full is what I'm saying. So you have to keep informing me. I have just fiddled with something, keep telling me. So I'll just pick up this one while people can sort of let me know what the volume's like. It says, hopefully Bridget Phillipson's move yesterday is the start of something. So I'm assuming what you're talking about here. I don't know it's the move of such. Because I was thinking to myself, what's Bridget Phillipson's move yesterday? Because I don't remember anything. But it is known, not in her role as education secretary, but as women's minister, equalities minister as well. It's actually the key point here. So the right-wing press at the moment, no one else is saying anything about Bridget Phillipson. So I don't think there's been a major announcement unless I've missed it. But the right-wing press are up in arms yesterday about so it's about the court ruling. So I've got, for example, the Telegraph here. Stand aside, Phillipson. The equality law is clear. Trans women are not women. No, it's not actually. And in actual fact, the judgment, the senior judge in that case made it very clear that do not go assuming too much in this. I seem to remember him actually saying, do not. That's not what they were saying. They said that is not what they were saying. They said for the purposes of the Equality Act, the various provisions within it, where it says women, it refers to biological women. And again, that can be debated. But at the end of the day, the Supreme Court is the highest court of the land. There's no point in arguing with it. The Labour could have easily just come out and said, look, well, that's really confusing. But here's the thing. So they're moaning, right? So the only reporting I'm getting on this, by the way, is from the right-wing press, because no one else has got anything to say about it. So they're moaning that she is still not releasing the EHRC guidance, but that's because it's bollocks. So it says here, hang on, it's written down some of her issues with it. Because think about it this way. How are they? First of all, I mean, the judgment did say that this does not cover all situations where there's gender separation or anything. The court, when they gave their judgment, they made it clear this doesn't apply to everything. Don't be taking this too far. And it's exactly what they did. So women's toilets. It's all about women's toilets. There's nothing else anyone's talking about. Who can go into a women's toilets, right? So what the sort of mainstream are trying to say is, well, only women, right? Well, but apparently that can't include trans women. So you think, okay, so some of the issues here, I'm trying to find it again in the bloody thing. I'll just do a search, then I'll find it easier. Oh, for Christ's sake, I can't spell. Right, here it goes. So this is just what the Telegraph are reporting. I can't know for certain. It's nice if you have a selection of media outlets reporting on it, but there aren't any others. Well, there's the Daily Mail, but I'm not really going to think they're going to be any better. So it says, in a statement submitted to the High Court, Ms. Phillipson is arguing that banning trans women from women's lavatories, would all, I tried to pronounce that like laboratory then, lavatories, would also imply that women could not take their infant sons into changing rooms at swimming pools. So first of all, let's look at that. So, well, that's right then, isn't it? How do you say trans women can't go into toilets without also saying that a young boy can't with their mother, right? Also says other scenarios, pregnant women choosing to use men's toilets. So it'd be like saying, those of us being men, we know that there's certain situations where women will use the men's toilets, right? It gives the example there of pregnant women using the men's toilets to avoid queues in like theatres and things like that. I'll give you some other examples. Anyone who's ever in their youth, or even now, some people never grow out of it, go out on the lash, right? You know that late at night, come a Friday or a Saturday evening, in a club or a pub or something like that, everyone's needing a piss every few minutes, right? It's like you're usually okay with your first couple of drinks and then you need a piss. And then after that, every time you take a sip, you need another piss, don't you? When you're drinking too much. So you'll know that late at night in the men's toilets, you will get women going in because the queues are too much. So women will just go into the men's. No one has a problem with it. They're not going to use their urinals. They're going to go into the cubicles. No one has an issue with that. Whereas with this excessively purist interpretation, which the Supreme Court themselves said do not take. They said do not take this to the nth degree. I can't remember the exact words. I'd have to look it up. But that's what would happen. So you would also ban women, cis women, using the men's toilets, just like, if there's desperate queues in the women's. No one has a problem with that. She then went, I don't know what this other bloody thing is. And they're saying this is palpable nonsense. No reasonable interpretation of the guidance or of the law would prevent mothers from accompanying young children. No, that's quite right. But also no reasonable interpretation of the guidance or the law would say that trans women can't. Trans women pose no... It's like, can a trans woman assault a cis woman in women's toilets? Well, yes, but so could a cis woman. So could an actual cis man who's just walked into the women's toilets. It's utterly nonsense. Anyway, nonsense. Amy there saying, first street in kind of defending puberty blockers, leave a review, begin partially positive to Phillipson rejecting EHRC guidance. What's going on this work? Nervous, it's all a setup. So what it is this. It's not difficult to understand. Labour are in a mess over this, but it's not difficult. And I've said before, Labour's policies are transphobic. There's no getting away from it. There's no trying to sugarcoat it. They are objectively transphobic, right? But they are not the same as, say, the Conservatives or Reform UK on this. They're not actively trying to shit on trans people. They're just trying to not lose votes. And I've said before, they're getting this very badly wrong, because actually they are. Their transphobia is not because that's who they are or it fits in with something else. It's entirely strategic. It's a bit like Kemi Badenoch now deciding that we should leave the ECHR, the good one, and cancelling net zero and all the rest of it, right? She's not doing that because that's who she is or that's who her party are, but because they think they need to do that to be competitive, which again is wrong. They're getting that badly wrong as well, because in actual fact, the leaving the ECHR is a bit more mixed amongst those sort of voters. But net zero is popular. You know, tackling climate change is actually popular. It's something that Nigel Farage is actually against most Reform UK supporters on. But Badenoch's, you know, just Labour. It's just this really mad situation. Neither Labour nor the Conservatives are really properly assessing. They're not, for whatever reason. Labour were doing this well a couple of years ago. The Conservatives haven't done it well for years. Labour were doing it well a couple of years ago, and I do not know the reason. I can only speculate. But for some reason, both of those parties are unable to strategically analyse public attitudes in terms of electoral strategy. Which is why it's no surprise that the Conservatives and Labour are now in the polls. They're in the mix with like the also-rans. Labour are on roughly the same level of polling as the Green Party, for Christ's sake. It's utterly ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. But that's the reason. Like Labour are not transphobic, and the people even I don't just mean the wider party. I mean even the people at the top of Labour are not. The odd one will be, right? But by and large, they're not transphobic. They just think they need to be strategically. So it's like the government is transphobic, but they aren't. So, you know, there are going to be these like growing pains while they try and work out how they can sort of manage the electoral strategy without actively shitting on people unnecessarily. And this is why they're in this sort of a mess. So, you know, when the Supreme Court released their judgment, the government immediately says, oh, great, this offers clarity, when it was quite obvious it would offer no clarity. Because do women want trans men going into the women's toilets? No, they don't. So what do they want to happen? They just want to ban trans women from women's toilets, but they don't want trans men going into women's toilets. So where do they want trans men to go? Well, if you say the men's toilets, like I'm talking about a situation where it's only men's and women's, by the way. Sometimes you have gender neutral toilets anyway, in which case they've got nothing to say about it. Or sometimes they'll say, well, use the disabled toilets. We're like, well, what about disabled people? But also, like, so would you say they can't say that trans men should use the men's toilets, because then it's, well, why can't trans women use the women's toilets then? You're just basically saying that trans people should use the men's toilets regardless. You know, whereas they want to say, what they want to be able to claim is there's no such thing as a trans person, right? And any trans person you might meet from time to time is just a bit confused. So what they want to say is that you should have to use the toilet of your sort of birth, gender at birth. But then you're saying that trans men should use the women's toilets, which they don't want to say. Absolute nonsense. Did I see what the MD of M&S Food said about Brexit a couple of days ago? Basically needs a better agreement. Yeah. I don't think it's the same one. Well, MD is different anyway. But I do remember the CEO of Marks and Spencer's, when Brexit was happening, complaining that they couldn't get their sandwiches to France. And yet Marks and Spencer's, under that leadership, were not complaining about Brexit until they realised it was going to hit them. Oh no, the leopards are eating my face. Who could have ever seen that? We do need a better agreement. We need a much closer agreement. At the moment, I mean, the thing is, right, we are actually working on, but the problem is we're working on all these individual agreements and each one has its sticking points. For example, the big agreement being looked at the moment, like there's lots of agreements. Like we're still moving on implementing the Windsor Framework, which until we've done that, the EU will not start to implement. We had this agreement in May, right, for closer trade ties, but the EU aren't going to start work on that, although they've agreed it, until, and they did say this at the time, until we've implemented the Windsor Framework, right? So we're still doing that. That is still causing, obviously headaches in Northern Ireland. But the other big one, that again, all of these things are, and that's another problem I have with this. The problem, like, I understand how at the moment they just have to work on lots of individual agreements, lots of bilateral agreements, because we can't do any of the big ones at the moment. But the problem then is each of these agreements is individually quite small, so it doesn't really get mentioned in the media much. The Erasmus one did. I think that's a big one. But another one that would actually be a big one, but you're not seeing it reported on, is the EU single market for energy. So we are actively trying to join a little bit of the single market, but for energy, not for goods. That would result in lower bills. So again, Labour know they need to get energy bills down. They did it a little bit artificially in the budget this year. They really need to be able to show that they're getting energy bills. Energy bills is basically like eggs for America last year. So Labour know they need to crack that one, no pun intended. But so there's lots of things they can do for it and are doing for it. But joining the EU's single market for energy would be a good one. But there are wrangles over that as well in terms of fee. Like, just like if you've got a country outside the EU but wants to be part of the single market, they effectively pay a fee, a membership fee still. Not as much as EU membership would cost you, but a single market fee. And like Norway, for example, pay that. And it's quite a lot, actually, really, for the size of their economy. But, it is what it is. So we're going to have to do the same thing to join this. And we know that as well. We're not trying to quibble about that. But there is apparently a bit of a wrangle over the framing of it. What we're trying to avoid is paying a general fee, because then that general fee will go to fund. Remember the EU funds special projects in deprived areas. That the EU actively moves money around and targets deprived parts of various countries in the EU. Deprived parts of Britain used to get EU funding. And the government at the time would say, well, we'll have that. It's just coming out of our membership fee anyway, so we will just allocate it. And then they didn't, you see. And that's why, you see, because they won't. So we don't want the Daily Telegraph, basically, or our government doesn't want the Daily Telegraph to publish a report saying, we're giving the EU this money in order to spend on some poor town just outside Bavaria or something, right? So we're trying to sort of link it. But there's nonetheless, there is an argument about the money we join for it. But we do want to do it. And that's, one of the things I'm hoping we can have announced maybe at the next year's summit. Maybe at the next year's summit, we get an agreement on joining the EU single market for energy, because that will make things cheaper. That was one of the big problems we had when electricity prices massively skyrocketed after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. One of the things hampering us, one of the things making things extra expensive for us, was not being part of the single market for energy. Because it meant that when we, at times you have to get electricity from the European grid, we were paying top dollar for it. EU agrees €90 billion loan as Putin claims Kyiv refusing to end this conflict. Yeah, well, he could just leave any time, couldn't he? The 210 billion injection for frozen assets wasn't agreed. No, there's multiple problems with that one. The biggest is Belgium, as I say, is concerned that because it holds most of them, if in the future Russia were to take them to court and win, they'd have to pay over 100 billion euros, which they haven't got, right? I mean, imagine the UK suddenly having to hand over like 80 billion quid or something, 90 billion quid. It's like, well, we haven't got it. And no government would survive the cuts to public services that would be needed. And Belgium's got a much smaller economy than we have. So for Belgium, the actual equivalent amount is way more. So they're a bit worried about that. They say, look, we'll only do it if the EU basically shares the risk. But there's another problem with it as well. And that is that Russia is saying that if you seize our assets, I mean, we've frozen them, but we haven't seized them. So if you seize our assets, we're going to seize yours, because there are tens of billions of euros worth of assets in Russia belonging to European countries that Putin is threatening to seize. I think he has actually seized some of them already, but he's threatening to seize those, right? So, and you could say to yourself, these companies should not have stayed in Russia at the time. They shouldn't have done, but they have done. So there's a bit of also a fear of tit for tat here. So it is very messy. The 90 billion euro loan won't be enough for the next two. It's enough for now, but it won't be enough. I think they needed something like 200 billion. Particularly with America not paying very much into it now. So people want lower energy bills, but it involves the EU, they say no. If it involves the EU, they say no. Dogma over evidence, the biggest barrier to improvement society. Well, the thing is, most people wouldn't say no. Most people just want things to be cheaper. You know, if you put it to most people, even Brexit voters, your energy bills will be cheaper if we join the single market for energy. They will agree. Remember, the reason why they voted for Brexit is because they were told leaving would make things cheaper. Most of the people who voted to leave, the vast majority of them have no ideological opposition to the EU. They don't care about the EU. In it, out of it, they don't mind, right? They were just told things would get cheaper, that things would be better outside. It's not. If you tell them, if we join the single market for energy, your energy will be cheaper, they'll go, well, join the single market for energy then. It's only remember the media and certain political groups are like well out of kilter with most people, but they just set the narrative all the time. Same thing with the single market more widely. If you can actually explain to people how it will make their grocery bills cheaper, their food bills cheaper, same thing, sorry, clothes bills cheaper, things like that, that it means the NHS can get medicines more easily and quickly and won't have as many shortages. People will say, well, join the single market then. You know, so people just want their standard of living to improve. And if you can just explain to people actually how joining the EU would do that, they will want us to do it tomorrow. But no one's really telling them, or not enough. I want to know who holds debt secured against the Russian assets held in Belgium. I'm not expert on all the details. I just know that most of it is in Belgium. So if what the Belgian government wants is for the EU to take responsibility, so that if they were in the future sued for whatever reason, that it becomes the EU that's liable, not Belgium. Which means Belgium would still have a stake in it, of course, because they're an EU member, but that they wouldn't be left with the baby, so to speak. We're discussing the briefing shake-up. Okay, let's do that one then. Let's do that one. Yes, because I did put that one in. We haven't done it yet. Last part of it. So, first of all, it's not quite what I have called for. I have called, just to remind people, what have I called for Labour to do instead of this briefing bollocks? I've called them to do press conferences every day. Downing Street-based press conferences. Could be Keir Starmer, could be another minister, something like that. Or number 9, doesn't matter. Somewhere some Downing Street press briefing every day, just like Trump does in the Oval Office, just like presidents in general do in the Oval Office. Just have that every day. It means the government sets the agenda, right? Now, what happens at the moment is they do briefings instead. So journalists troop along to have briefings, usually not even by staff. It's like the spokesperson. And they get to ask questions and they get various prevarications. And then they do the same thing in the afternoon. And it's a total waste of time. And Labour have said it's a waste of time, right? So what they're going to do instead, they're going to can the afternoon briefings because they say it's just the same bloody questions. Or if it's not the same questions, you're going to get the same answers anyway. And they're also going to open it out to others, like including content creators, although they don't say what that means. Now, some journalists are kicking back on this. I'm going to just read one of them. What is it saying here? So, Press Association political editor David Hughes, the outgoing chair of the lobby and the Daily Mirror's political editor, Lizzie Buchan, the incoming chair, said, "We are greatly concerned by this step and furious that the lobby was not consulted about this move, which restricts access and we fear scrutiny." Now, here's the thing, right? Governments don't like scrutiny. That is true. Governments don't like scrutiny. For example, the Conservatives under Boris Johnson, these lobby briefings used to be in the Palace of Westminster. Boris Johnson moved them to Downing Street. Why? Because he couldn't control which journalists could attend them in Westminster, because it's nothing to do with him. But he can control who gets into Downing Street, right? So that was restricting scrutiny. This, it's one of those things. Am I going to say this isn't restricting scrutiny? Any government wants to, doesn't like scrutiny, obviously. But what I'm going to say here is, no, this sounds better to me because it's going to open it out to more people. We'll see how it works in practice, but it's going to open it out to more people. And the other thing I'll say is this. These senior journalists, right, what they're really worried about is not that the government won't be facing scrutiny, but that they won't have their exclusive control over the lobby process. That's what they're worried about. They don't like the competition. They're going to have to compete with others. So there's so I'll just quickly point out Professor Pigeon. We have discussed the trans position a little bit earlier on, yes. So if you watch it back after we've finished live, then yes, I did have a few things to say about it. But no, in terms of the press briefing, they're just, because I'll tell you, right, I'll tell you something. If you go onto the Daily Mirror, let me have a look. I'm going to Google it, right? Daily Mirror, because one of the people moaning's from the Daily Mirror, right? Daily Mirror. I'm going to type into Google, Daily Mirror, Downing Street press briefing. I'll click on news. Nothing. Nope, nothing. So basically these outlets, these journalists trot along to these press briefings, right? And then they don't report on it. They don't report them. So what scrutiny? It's their scrutiny, yes, but what about aren't they supposed to be doing it on our behalf, the public's behalf? If they're doing it on the public's behalf, why don't they publish the results of the press briefing? They don't, do they? Every now and then, they might report on something that's said at the press briefing, but that's just when, but they don't report the press briefing. So there's no public scrutiny as things stand. They're not reporting on it. So that's what I would say. Given that the mainstream media, this elite, this clique of mainstream journalists that gets to go to these briefings, given that they are not reporting on the briefings, why not open it out to people who might? Right? Why? There'll be people out there. I'm not saying I would do it, but there will be people on social media, on YouTube in particular, if they could get access to press briefings every day, they would do a video every day on what happened at the press briefing. Every day. Why shouldn't they get to go? Why should someone from the Daily Mirror or the Daily Telegraph or wherever the hell get to go when they don't actually report on what's said there, when someone who would report on what's said there doesn't get to go? So I'm going to say, well, Dave Peacock's there saying good progress in the right direction. I would say, yeah, it's not what I'm calling for. It's not what I think would be the best thing, because it'll still be boring. At the end of the day, a lobby briefing is boring. You need to tart it up. Like the Oval Office stuff, even when it's not, I mean, obviously anything with Trump is clickbait worthy because he's batshit, right? But even other presidents like Biden, Obama, even George Bush Jr., like when they used to do their things in the Oval Office, you know, there was always, it was more interesting. You could actually watch it, or you could watch bits of it. You could certainly read reports of it. The reason they're not reporting on what's going on in the lobby briefings is because it's boring. So Labour need to actually, you know, they need to make it watchable. They need to, I would say they need to stream it themselves, actually record it. They don't record these, record them. Make it interesting enough to be worth recording and putting online. If Labour decide to make Brexit the big election thing next time round, could secure them a majority, in my opinion. I'd be very careful about making comments like that. There's no evidence for that. At the same time, if they did need to make it about a single issue, Brexit would be the best one, because if they want to strategically make the next election about a single issue, it has to be one where Reform UK cannot possibly align with them. So, although I've said another potentially good one would be electoral reform, Reform UK could promise electoral reform, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be, something that separates the voters out. In terms of ones where Labour could, get on something and then say something that Reform UK would not align with them on. Brexit would be an obvious one, so that could be a big one. So it could work. It's not. I don't think there's any issue that is a guaranteed will definitely get them a majority. Otherwise, they would do it. Do you know what? They would do it. There are pitfalls with it, but it would nonetheless divide people between Reform UK and Labour. Another one would be net zero, or anything to do with the climate emergency. But is that a big enough one? It should be, but but that is another one that they could make the next election about that. That is possible. There aren't really too many others, in all honesty. Like workers' rights, they'll have already passed the workers. I mean, they could talk about defending it, but if they go into the next election trying to get voters to vote for them to defend what they've already done, that will work. They mustn't do that. It doesn't work. We know that from so many elections in the past 10 years in different countries. If you go into the election with a don't change because it will be worse, you will lose. So they need something that's like, this is going to get better if you vote for us. Not vote for us to keep things as they are. It needs to be a vote for us because we'll make this thing better. So Brexit could maybe do that. The problem is, of course, the EU are a bit reticent about it, while Reform UK could well come into power at any time. But nonetheless, get a big public mandate for it. That would be good. It could be on climate change. That will certainly be something that Nigel Farage will not align with them on. I'm not really sure there's anything else that'd be big. I hope they invite Phil. I hope they don't, because I don't want to go to London all the time. Unless they're going to do anything remotely, which they won't because they don't record them. So this will be, that's my only downside with it. In the digital age, you still have to physically be based in London or be able to get into London to go. So no, I'm not going to London just for a press briefing. Make the next election about PR. Again, no, because Reform UK could well agree to do that as well. You wouldn't. Don't get me wrong. I would like them to carry out electoral reform, but it's not. You won't be able to make the election about that issue, because Reform could easily just say, well, we'll also reform it, but we'll do it better, right? Going back to the journalists here, they've also been paid to cherry pick the bits that most suit certain narratives for their deep-pocketed sponsors. Yes. So I think these journalists I think they're already worried. They already don't like the competition from content creators on social media. There's a lot of competition in journalism these days. They don't like it. And now they're being taken away some of their elite privileges. And it is a privilege, because there's only so many get accreditation for these briefings. So if Labour are going to open it out, we'll see how that works in practice next year. But if they're going to open it out and they're going to include content creators, that just makes sense. And that's better. It just means these top journalists at these legacy mainstream outlets are they're going to have a tougher time fighting for relevance, because they're now losing. They're not worried about losing access, because they're not losing access. They're worried about losing exclusive access. But they shouldn't have exclusive access, because they represent a smaller and smaller section of the news ecosystem now. Steve's saying it will be televised. It's also because it will be televised, we'll be able to see them do their jobs, or not the case may be. Oh, well, that's all. I didn't realise that then. That's better. That actually means that they could potentially, if it's televised and broadcast live, then maybe they will be able to get content creators from around the country, because you'll just give you they'll just give you a link to feed in so you can ask your question. Oh, that might work. The EU and Green versus Reform, that would be Green policies, I think, rather than the Green Party, versus Reform can be framed as moving forwards versus backwards. Yes, you can. Yeah, you could do that. You could do it. And there's no, when I say one or the other, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. It can absolutely be both. Happy Christmas. Thank you very much, Plump. Happy Christmas to you as well. Labour needs to plan already for what they want to focus for 2029. Well, they will be doing. If they promise something great, they have no plans for right now. People will question why keep it for the elections and not now. Well, they need to get better at communicating what they are doing right now. We're running out of time, so last one here. Funny how anyone who says they believe in competition are outraged when better competition to themselves comes along. See free marketers in particular. Well, yeah, exactly. And all these people fawning over Trump. The Conservative Party, they're supposed to be free market capitalists. They're fawning over Trump. Trump's not a free market capitalist. He's applying untold levels of state interference in the market, the global markets and the domestic American market. So it is utterly ridiculous. It just shows you these people's principles are like, there's one thing for a politician to have their sort of positions malleable, because you need to do that in a democracy, because it's not about who you are or what your ideas are. It's about, are you doing what the public want you to do? So a politician has to shift position as times change. And I don't know why it's seen as an attack on a politician when they do, because they're supposed to reflect what the public want them to do, not what they want to do. But just in general, these political movements who will just sacrifice their principles overnight just for the sake of winning. But anyway, no such thing as a free market in the real world. Well, there isn't, no, but you can still move towards it. Like, there's no such thing as communism in the real world, but you can still have people who are very, very left-wing say, well, let's move as close to it as we can, right? You could do the same on the right. You can say, well, we're not going to have full free market capitalism, but we can move close to it. But they don't. By aligning with Trump, they're basically saying, oh, yeah, that's not really a firm belief of ours. Well, what is then? What is a firm belief if they don't believe in free markets or competition in the markets? Because Trump, there's no competition either. Well, actually, no, they do. The competition is how much can you bribe me to give you some benefit, some competitive advantage. Trump is allowing certain companies to have a competitive advantage over others just because they give them a gold watch or something, or a free burger. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. I will be presumably on Graham's stream in about 20 odd minutes. Have a good day. Until next time, I'll see you later.